All right, welcome back to the Autodesk stand here at IBC. I'm going to show you Power Your Creative Pipeline. And really what this is about is integrating the Flame family of products with a complex pipeline for a complex computer graphics heavy job. So it could be a film, could be a commercial, could be anything really. I'm going to use a great example from the guys at PsyOp to show you this. So if we could just come over here, I'll play you this master that was essentially a web-based commercial for Samsung Galaxy that was around for the World Cup and has had 56 million views on YouTube so far. All right, so thanks again to PsyOp. Start with this.
Today, science fiction has turned to fact. Aliens have arrived.
All right, very cool. So that's actually just the first half of an epic commercial that's actually a full 4 minutes long, and it's really a cool piece. But you can imagine that this is not something that is a one-man show. It's not even probably a 10-man show. It were probably dozens of people that would work collaboratively on this, whether it's editors, compositors, computer graphics, 3D artists, and so on. And it all has to kind of come together. I'm going to show you how things start, but I want you to be thinking about the complexity of a job like this, where there's versions of almost everything. Even the raw footage gets versioned into a graded version, and that might be there might be a redo of that. And then as 3D rendering starts, there's not just one render version of the goalie shot. There could be 17 or 30 or who knows, right? And how do we manage that? How do we stay in some kind of control of that? Well, we do it with a pipeline. Really, we do it with a structured environment, perhaps a job tree where you know where things fit in your server structure so that you can go and find the latest version of the thing that you want on that day. So I'm going to start small here, but we're going to work our way up. Looking at really just the first step in the process then, you might start with taking the plates from editorial as they come into the finishing environment. So what I mean by that is we might have shot material. In this case, it was some Arilog C material that's going to get graded, but we would also have an editorial offline. So this is where our job, as we build the actual final edit here, might start. So let me just show you that. we'll come in here and we'll drag in my AAF and my reference. And really what will allow me to see here, if I just open this up, you'll see that this is the raw metadata, the unlinked metadata that was edited with, coming from the Avid AAF in this case. Let me put my reference below so that I can see a comparison of how things are supposed to look. Let me just show you this. So you can see how things start off with green screen elements, with ungraded material. There's going to be layers, so a foreground element, a midground, and a background for certain comps. That's why you see 3 items there, and so on. How do I go about this? Well, certainly I would want to then start linking the footage up. So I'm going to start by just doing a search, looking out at my dailies here, my raw material, day 1 of the shoot. They may not all be together there. That day 2 may still be on its way or whatever. But I'm going to start with what I have and link those up via perhaps file name and source timecode matching. More robust probably than tape name matching, since these days the tape name is not always that useful. But anyway, so that might take care of the easy stuff. We sometimes say that with conforming, the first 80% only takes 20% of the time. And what about the last 20%? We need to be able to do that quickly too. So we have some good solutions for it. Let's point to the day 2 that's actually in this ProRes 4444XQ format. I can link to footage that has alpha channels if I want. If it was animated footage, I could see maybe a render with an animation with an alpha channel, or I could ignore it in this case. So, because I'm going to grab this, link it up, and take care of that, the easy part. And now we come down to the troubled shots. You can see my footage is starting to fill up in my sequence, by the way. If I look here, you can begin to see the raw footage is arriving in my sequence, but I still have some unlinked clips. Well, what's the problem? Perhaps this one labeled bad TC is a giveaway that doesn't have good time code, right? So maybe what I might need to do here is do some troubleshooting. So I could actually slip the time codes in place if I know where I need to go to, or I could actually select a time code and say I want to add 1 hour to that. And that could help me. Otherwise, if I'm really stuck, I might just go back to a last resort here of working with the actual file names, assuming that may be correct, but the location that was edited with is different to the location of my media, right? So this might be, slash volumes, Mac hard drive, et cetera, but my material is in this location. So I'm going to go up to where I see I have the same drives, the same folders at the bottom end of the path. So what I could do is I can just hardwire it and say, as a last resort, if I don't have matching metadata, I can come in here and I can say, well, on all these shots, I would just like to take the generic part. Notice how it identifies, hey, something, one, something, star, one, something. But this part here, like I said, I'm going to hardwire it to my location, and that lets me link the rest up. Really, all that's left here in this situation is a Photoshop end graphic here. It's in my design art folder. And the only problem here is that it's not quite named the same, right? So if I look at this, you can see that I need to match to something called logo high rev v2 and so on. So I'll turn off my strict matching and make that final match. So this is a powerful conform tool with a lot of ability to solve troubleshooting problems. Let's now move in towards the ability to then start renaming. So the next challenge might be that the names here of the clips are not good for VFX. They're sort of ad hoc names that editorial may have used, or maybe they didn't name them at all, and they're just sort of raw camera names here. So what I'm able to do is I'm able to select a bunch of shots here, and I'm able to perform a rename, and this column here, which is currently empty, we're going to use as it's really a special metadata column that solves a problem that I'm going to show you. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rename shot 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and so on, which brings it much more into line with the way we'd want to work in visual effects, where we can refer to a shot in a very specific way by a number, right? But as you can see, there are multiple elements for some of the shots. So we need to deal with that. So, but first of all, we'll take the base line here. We'll use one of our tokens that we use for renaming the segment number, which is simply a counter that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I will add a 0 to that to make it count in tens and give my show a name. Maybe it's going to be something like this. The Samsung Galaxy shot 10. I want to define the padding even. I want to say, okay, that's how I want it to lay out. Go. So rename. So what's happened? This column is filled up now. And if I look a little more carefully at my shots, you can see how the original name is still there, but it's added this shot tag to them. So this is how we then deal with the next problem, which is, hey, these shots here need to be associated with that shot. These elements need to be associated with the shot overall, because it's the background, the alternate background perhaps, the green screen element. They all belong, in this case, to shot 180. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in. This is significant because how are we to know, how is the software to know which goes with which? Well, we can give it some guidance here, right? These plates go together. And then finally, what I'd be able to do would be to basically do a rename. So let me just show you that process where I rename. I'm having just done the rest of those. What I'll do is I'll be able to show you how by naming the tracks you could finish the job off and actually fix these names here. So by naming here, and I've gone ahead and named the tracks the way I like it. This could be incoming, element 1, element 2, whatever you like, and then you can select all the pieces here and do having got the shot name column fixed up, rename the actual name, the base names fully. So this will finish the job off and allow us to use that generic shot name. Notice that they're all part of shot 30, underscore track name. So that's going to differentiate the elements. So then what I'm left with is 10, 20, 30 BG, 30 BG alt, 30 FG. So you can see that now we're in a much more orderly way, and we're ready to distribute our work to the facility. We're ready to basically output all these shots to the shot tree, the job tree of our facility. This is how we stay organized, right? So we would come in here. I'm just going to go to the top of my job tree here, and you can see all the folder names that perhaps are already made, because other people may already be working. So if you look in here, you can see there's animation going on, there's effects, there's layout, there's lighting on the 3D side. And if I go into one of these, you can see all the different products that may have their scene information in there. But also, we'd like to take a look in compositing here, because this is where the Flame place is, and the batch folder, and this is where I need to be putting my work, right? So let's do it. What I do here is I drag out my sort of completed renamed piece there, and via a new sophisticated way of publishing, as we call it, we're going to spit out the elements that we need. And I've got some templates I can work with. Notice that this is also used to deliver like an AAF file with sequence information pointing to the original media for something like Media Composer or DaVinci Resolve. And I could come in here and use one of the templates here that gives me a shot name followed by a DPX folder, which I could make, capitalize DPX if I want, modify that out, a version number, and then the elements. Or, in this case, I'm going to show you one that fits the PSYOP job tree that we have here. So you can see it's going to go into the publish area, it's going to put the images down there, and it's going to start at a unique, the individual elements will fan out below. One more thing that we're going to do here is as well as outputting the media, which would be useful for any software, right, put in the right place, we're also going to join the dots back to our own timeline so as that we're going to output the source clips, foreground, midground, background. We're also going to output the batch, and that's Flame's essentially procedural compositing environment, which serves as a template with inputs and then the all-important output, which will feed the comp right back to the timeline. All of these pieces are versionable. So as well as outputting the raw plates, which I could do right here, what I might also then do is take the graded timeline. So this is, if we just look at this one, you'll be able to see this is a graded version. So it's all the same material, reconformed, but now we've got graded elements in place. So then this would essentially be my version 2 publish, all right? So like I said, even the sources have versions. So then this is going to go down. I'm going to change this to version 2, and it's going to output the source media with these input clips with a templated batch that will connect back to my timeline. And really the last thing that you'd want to see here would be how you would at this point start the process of a live timeline. So this live timeline here is really essentially the comeback. It's pointing to the graded media at this point, and each one of these clips is versionable in their own right. So we're going to see a little bit more of that in a second, but maybe the key thing here is just you can see that the media now lives on the job tree. It's not QuickTime ProRes anymore. It's DPX in this case, named correctly in exactly the right place on the storage. So now let's see what the experience is for another artist wanting to pick up one particular shot. Let's say your assignment is to work on, well, the next thing I want to show you is how you could pick up an individual shot and you'd know exactly where it would be because of the organization of this pipeline. That was what we just did. We just exported there. So let's actually recap it with some graphics, if we may, because I realize this is complicated. We all deal with this on complex jobs. So we started here with the Flame Premium, and really you could do this job with Flame Assist, also in the family, pushing out the content renamed to your job tree. Why do we do this? Because other software needs to work with the assets. Flare could be one of those pieces of software that works with the assets. Fundamentally, what we're doing is we're building a job tree, right? We're building that standardized structure, and one of the tools that's available to us are these special pointers, these open clip pointers, which allow us to join the dots right back to our own timeline. Conform assets, graded assets, rendered assets will all go into this versioning system, and the schematic could get pretty complicated. Maybe your facility already looks like that or worse. So let's come over to another workstation here. And I just want to show you how things look. If I'm sitting in a completely empty batch here, this could be Flare, it could be Flame. What I want to do is I want to just hit the load button. And I need to know, well, which shot am I going to work on? Well, I could, of course, just browse down the job tree here. And I know that I'm working compositing, I'm working on Flame, I'm in batch. Check it out. So there's already a version 1 and a version 2. What's the difference? Well, version 1 was the raw, version 2 the graded. And if I pick up this source, what you're going to see here is two important things. One, here's my 2 clips. And the second thing I want to point out to you is that you can always roll back to the previous version. So this paper trail, if you like, has already started. It's important to then point out the right file here is really how we get back to the pipeline. So we're going to render out another version here. Let me just plug this in for you and point out that a reason why you might want to roll back might be that you might have already started a key on this that needs to be done from that raw element, giving you a high quality key perhaps. We'll plug this in and connect it up just to save some time here. But really the power tool here in terms of putting you back on the grid is this write file node. And it knows exactly where to render, and it's already bumped itself to version 3, ready to go. So if I hit the render button here, I'm sending out my first rough comp here in this case. But where's it gone? And how could I get it back? Well, of course, another artist could come and just load that same folder, and now you see there's a version 3 available. Or I could come here and grab that timeline we talked about earlier, which is sitting in the Dropbox, bring it up here onto the timeline, and really I'm going to just roll down to the shot that we were just playing with, which I think was this one, right? And there's a little Dropbox here that allows me to see, just by touching this pop-up, oh wait, there's a new version, and there it is. So you can see how this is a connected workflow. Shall we take it up a notch here and show you how it's also an open ecosystem? And to do that, I want to show you working with Maya and Flare. And Toba-san is going to do some compositing with us in Flare. And I'm going to just switch over to Maya for a second here to show you how this works. So really, we've created this architecture where you can not just fan out the media, but also feed in the metadata, right? So this open clip format is really a versionable pointer, right? So if Toba starts there, he already has an EXR sitting in his comp, and he could go ahead and make the first render for us. Did you do that already? Sorry, did I miss it? Yeah. And then in Maya here, essentially when I make a new render version, as a post-render script here, I'm going to run that script that just bumps my version so that all he has to do is hit that check for update buttons. And you can see that the new version of the render has now made it into compositing. And if he were to hit render one more time, I'll go back to Flame here. And you can see how these changes ripple through the pipeline, right? So this is pretty powerful as a way of being able to keep your artists connected to each other and really just save yourself from the human error of version change, right? So there it is. Okay, so that's good. I've got some time to show you a little bit of the creative stuff on this job. I'd like to do that now, and we'll come back in a moment to look at how you manage multiple deliverables, multiple master timelines in just a few minutes. Okay, so if we wanted to look at this one shot here, I've got an interesting example for you where we have our goalie, and really what was needed here was a little bit of out-the-box thinking, a little finishing compositing to make the moment that the hit happens of the ball a bit more dramatic. We need a more convincing lighting effect. Whether he gets electrocuted or zapped or whatever the client wants, we need to work on that. So by taking some of the plate elements here into my batch environment, what I'm going to do is just show you how this could be solved. So if we were to just grab a couple of these pieces here, I'm going to just start with this piece. I think should do the trick. The rather innovative method that this artist, his name is Elad Offer there at PsyOp, used, along with the other talented people there, was really a way of being able to take an alembic cache, which is a piece of geometry. It's a moving, deforming piece of geometry that you wouldn't perhaps typically think to use in compositing, more of a pipeline cache format. But the great thing about it is that it's exactly the right shape, of course, to match the underlying footage, but it also can be relit. So that's the great thing about geometry, right? So if you need something that is 3D in nature and the light glances from one side and moves to the other or whatever, you couldn't do that with just a matte cutout. You need some geometry. And what he did, I thought was quite innovative, was he actually went a step further and used that geometry in wireframe view, which is quite appropriate for this content. And you can see how it sort of comes alive here in wireframe view. You can see the detail in this almost 2 million polygons sitting here in the compositor. And really what we have is the pieces that could then be worked on. Like I said, it can be lit, but it's still just plain white. What about some electric blues, some green tones in our lighting effect? Well, have you heard of Matchbox? This is really a technique of generating all kinds of interesting images. This one here is a fractal generator that is fed by one of our textures internally here. Matchbox is really the community of users building their own cool stuff in the Flame community, right? So if we wanted to, we could then change the preset here to a different source, and you see how I get a completely different result. This is just a really interesting way, it just reacts to light in a really interesting way. So if I went for that, think how long it would have taken me to build something that had all those colors in, and I'm just sort of, doing a little guitar solo to get it to come out, right? So you could see how this is going to texture my guy like this, and really if I just move the light here, you'll be able to see how that can react to it, okay? So of course I'd want to crank that up a little more. I might want to add some blooming, one of our lighting effects, which is going to allow the geometry to actually bloom and blur and so on. So I could get an interesting sort of a stretch look here. I could crank it up and so on. So this is really just a nice way of doing it. I want to show you another example real quick, a and also a technique whereby we can take this work that's in isolation and bring it back to the pipeline that we were talking about earlier. So what do I mean? Well, if I take a slightly further along timeline here, you're going to see what I mean. So if I, later in the job, when the comps are starting to come together, here's the different comps that are towards the end of that piece. What I might want to do is go to this timeline and say, okay, well, I've worked on this little trick that I think I can use, but I need to put it on the grid. I need to put it into the pipeline. So what I do is I take the latest version, which is going to be this latest version right here, and do what we call, not just revise it, but append this to what I'm already working on. So then what this does is it brings the whole comp of whatever was happening here into my environment, but my work is still here. So I could simply, if this was a redo, I could just plug this straight in and connect it to that important write node and hit render, and it would arrive as a new version. In this case, it's a slightly different, just a slightly different use of the same technique. This is the other shot that has the defenders in it, and you'll be able to see if I zoom out a little more. There they are. The problem here was that there wasn't enough reflection on the ground. So if we just look at our reflections, the great thing about them is that they're actually not, they're those same Alembic models, so you can see how I can rotate them around and get reflections from any angle. Just need to line it up the way I want. And of course, real physical lighting isn't necessarily what you want, even though it might seem like you want it. Because look at the problem here. This is essentially the let me get the right plate here. This is the pre-comp render, and you can see some reflection on the ground, but it wasn't dramatic enough. And when they smash, there's going to be like an electrical storm. There's nothing there, and it's a shiny floor. So how are we going to deal with that? Well, certainly we'd want to introduce it into our comp here. And really what I want to show you is how, if I just look at this guy right here, and look at it in that scene linear compositing space that this is all done in, what I'm able to do is whilst looking downstream at the effect, I can move my reflections in 3D space. It's a lot more than just you could do with a matte. So I thought that was neat. That would then send right back to the pipeline here. And I want to just finish up by showing you some of what you can do with when you're towards the end of the job and you have multiple timelines that are in different states. What I mean by that is if you have different people working on different instances of a timeline, they might put the render in one and not in the other. And you get this crazy matrix of, hey, I just updated shot 30, but is it in the 30-second version, the 60-second version, the 90-second version, and so on, the international director's cut, the almost final. You've probably been there. So what we have here is a dynamic link between our shots and essentially their timelines. Notice that at a given place, if I look at some disparity here, you'll notice that this shot here is sitting on an older version. The newer versions are there, but for whatever reason, it's back on an older version. It may be that on a Friday night, they said, I like this version. I don't want it to change, but should I want to sync up my timelines, those versions are sitting there waiting for you to go get. So let me just illustrate this by going via this timeline, not the master that I started with, and make a change on this shot. This time I'm just going to create a new version. And by the way, not just my versions here, but anyone else's updates. And I think Toba might be making an update for us. Hopefully he hasn't put any obscene gestures in the comp. And I'm sure he wouldn't. He's a very nice fella. What I wanted to do for you was just to show you how I could make a change here and quickly be able to see something else. So let's just change the color of the rays here. Let's just get some a different color of deep blue here for the duration of my rays. That last minute change. But of course, I'm only making it in one of my timelines. That one, arbitrarily. You can see that these other timelines are out of date in various ways. There's subtle differences and major differences. So what I want to do for you here is just show you how if you take these different pieces, by selecting them all, instead of just going and bumping the pop-up on every single shot, which I could do, I'm going to come in here and tell it via a macro, all of my timelines, it could be 50 timelines in folders, by the way, select the latest version. And what that's going to do is that's going to go check all the timelines, all the updates, and there it is. It's going to bring me all the way up to date on all my shots. So that's a pretty huge efficiency gain, right? So you don't have to swap your individual shots in. You're able to dynamically update to the latest version when and where you want to. Let's just recap what we saw in a 3-up view here, if we may. Really, what we wanted to see then was how it started down here in the lower left with Flame Assist, and you're publishing, right? You're essentially issuing footage to the right places in the server structure. Compositing on the Flare, but also the job tree. If you remember, this was really a structure where you could see, go get what you need and always see the latest version. And then finally, those versions rippling back into multiple deliverable timelines at the end of your job. So that's really plumbing Flame into your pipeline. And that's what this presentation is all about. Thank you so much to the guys from PsyOp. I will finish by playing back this master from those guys. So let me just play you the second half, because it's a really cool long piece of this content. So finish off with that. Thanks again to the guys from PsyOp. Yeah. All right, cool. So please ask more questions here at the info booth or check out a live demo at the side of the booth. We'll be right back in just a few minutes.